All right, welcome to the Veteran Stories Podcast. This is our first podcast, and we are super excited to be visiting Bob Beard today at ASU. He's a senior program manager at ASU's Center for Science and the Imagination, but he's also a Marine. That's why he's on the show today.
Yeah, there's a lot of crayons just off camera that I'm going to snack on later, but I'm going to try to keep it civil right now.
Craft services, man. Only the best crayons for our Marines. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for coming in today.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. How you doing?
It's good, man. It's busy, but wouldn't have it another way.
Yeah, we're filming in December, right? So a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of shuffle. I'm graduating next week, so everything's been busy. It's been crazy. Yeah, really excited about it though. But yeah, I wanted to come in today and talk to you. What made you want to join the Marine Corps?
Oh man. Well, let's see. I had a very persuasive recruiter who plied me with pizza and skee ball one day, and this is not a joke either. I was actually all set to join the Air Force. I knew that I was going to join the military. Since I was about 11 years old. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. And, like a lot of those guys, he came back from the war, sort of like literally and figuratively put all of his stuff in a box and didn't deal with it.
Yep.
And then a couple years before he passed, he just sort of like unloaded this stuff on me. And, as an 11-year-old, like I was sort of taken with the, of course, like the heroism and the bravery and stuff like that. But also as I sort of grew up, I felt sort of like I needed to be a steward, right, of my grandfather's like story and his legacy. And I ended up joining the military. I was also all set to join the Air Force, and then shout out to the Marine recruiters. Called me one summer in between junior and senior year and said, you ever thought about joining the military? I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to join the Air Force. He's like, can I tell you a little bit about the United States Marine Corps? And not too long afterwards, I signed away 4 years just on the strength of Peter Piper Pizza.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was awesome. There's probably a better origin story in there somewhere, but it's mine, so I'll own it.
All right, so yeah. East Coast or West Coast Marine?
West Coast, Camp Pendleton, and Camp Pendleton MCRD San Diego, then Camp Pendleton. So pretty much West Coast my entire time. Deployed with the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit for one pump. So did a couple workups, did a Westpac, and then got out in 1999.
Right on. So you were in from 96 to 99.
95 to 99.
95 to 99.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 96.
Well, most of
3 years.
Most of that was just like going to boot camp during the holidays, which is like, do not recommend.
not a plus, but
no.
Probably got a bunch of pissed off drill sergeants and everything who wish they didn't have to be with all the Marines and could be with their spouses.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, would you want to spend the holidays with this guy? No, it's bad. It's bad scene.
No, thanks.
It's scene.
Yeah. But, so what was your MOS?
I was an ordnance Marine, so I was in charge of, making sure that, the bullets and the bombs and the grenades just didn't interact badly with each other, right? And then when I went out with the MEU, I was in charge of sort of embarkation, right? Putting those on ships. So it's like high explosives Tetris. Like it was a good time. It's a good time.
So I was in the Navy when I was, for my first go round, right? And on the ship, when we went go out to sea, all of this stuff we'd have to count every freaking thing. I'm sure it was the same for you guys, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's a huge pain because when you're getting underway, there's all of this stuff that you have to do before anybody can leave. And when you come back, it's the same, right? You come back and all the explosives have to be accounted for, right? It's the same for you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, no thanks.
One time had a pallet of mortars that were being transported, like ship to shore, right? And they ended up dropping them. And so in the middle of the night, like I'm called out to jump on an LCAC, basically a hovercraft, right? And go out and find where these mortars are under the sea. Then a couple Navy divers went down and grabbed them for us. But yeah, that's about the most high speed that my like supply chain management job got me. But it was pretty cool.
That's actually a really cool story.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
That's awesome.
Not bad for a 22-year-old.
Right, right. Man. Well, what made you want to leave it?
I knew that, going to the military was just going to be a temporary thing. I was going to do my 4 years. I was going to have, whatever adventure the government wanted to send me on, and then I was going to get out and go to college, right? Didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was just, I was going to go to college. That was another thing that, I sort of promised myself as a younger person. and ended up getting out of the military and going into a career in broadcasting. So worked for a couple radio stations, worked for a TV station, worked for some print media, and then landed here at ASU in 2008, so a while back.
So how'd you get into broadcast?
Well, I have a face for radio, and I'm also an only child, so I kind of just like don't take no for an answer. And funny story, like the day of my EAS, right, the end of active service. So I was on terminal leave for about 3 weeks or so, and the day that I officially got out of the Marine Corps, I drove down to the radio station here in town and just went over and like sort of knocked on the door like it was like the 1940s and there was a help wanted sign. And I was like, "Hi, I'd like to join your organization." And the receptionist there, she's like, "Well, why? Like, what are your qualifications?" And I basically told her, "I just got out of the Marines and I'll do anything you tell me to do." And that was enough to sort of get me in the door where I started, driving around the radio station van and, passing out T-shirts and, just having some fun. And it parlayed it into, I guess what you'd call a career, as much of a career as you can have in commercial broadcasting in the early 21st century.
Yeah.
Excuse
awesome.
me. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. So what led you into what you're into now with ASU?
Yeah, so when I landed at ASU, I landed in public broadcasting, right? And so I worked for Channel 8, brought to you by viewers like you, really, really fell in love with the idea that you could do sort of broadcasting and outreach, and you could use the tools of the media to educate people, to sort of, grab people and get them to care about, things that are important to our society, right? Public broadcasting's very good about that, about, sort of lifelong learning. And so when the opportunity came to join the center that I'm at now, the Center for Science and the Imagination, I sort of jumped at the chance and, had sort of the media experience that they were looking for and sort of the outreach experience and just the enthusiasm for, a place called the Center for Science and the Imagination. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? And I've been with them for 8 years. Been here 8 years.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's the program that you've been working on right now?
Yeah. So the Center for Science and the Imagination is a research and outreach center that gets people thinking about the future in sort of positive and inclusive ways, right? A lot of the times when you ask people about the future, they don't really have an opinion. They're like, well, this is something that someone else will figure out. This is something that Elon Musk will figure out. This is something that Jeff Bezos will figure out. And it's like, sure, those are futures that we could go into, and yeah. Right now they're sort of, the architects of the future, but there's lots of other sort of ways of thinking about the future and ways of behaving in the next 20 years that maybe we want to consider as well. And so that's what the Center for Science and the Imagination does. It helps people and organizations and community members think about futures that they want, think about futures that are inclusive and inspiring and just, right? And so we do that with big organizations. We've done projects with NASA and the Smithsonian and the National Science Foundation. And a handful of years ago, I started thinking, well, could we use the same tools that we use for these big organizations, for them to think about the futures that they want and how, they want the future to play out in the next 15 to 20 years? And can we use those same tools to apply to sort of personal transformation? And the first group that I was really interested in researching is veterans, right? Because as you and I both know, right, when you get out of the military, the entire world is different, right? It's not something that just happens, 10 to 15 years down the line. It's like the minute that you sign those papers and you drive off base, like the world is completely different. Yeah. And so can we use those same tools for futures thinking? Can we use the tools of anticipation and foresight and scenario planning and strategic change to help people navigate that really weird time of military to civilian transition? And so that's the goal of this project, the Veterans Imagination Project.
Okay, very cool. And so if I remember right, you've got about 15 people run through the program?
So far, yeah, we started this program in 2022. We piloted it right here at ASU, and then we went out into the community, a couple different places in the community, out in the East Valley and the West Valley, to sort of test out these methods. And so we've had 15 participants from I think 5 different branches of service, and actually a reservist joined it as well. So it was really interesting to map his experiences as someone who sort of occupies that liminal space all the time. Gray space, yeah. And so I think there's applications certainly for veterans, but also for anybody in transition, as reservists or veterans or other people facing change in their lives.
I mean, I thought it was a really good idea, using that futures idea, right? Trying to visualize it. I loved how you talk about the different ways that you guys help people do that.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about how you get people to see their future and visualize it?
Yeah. So, we lean pretty heavily on the tools of speculative fiction, right? And I think a lot of times people will sort of write off like science fiction as like, oh, that's silly, right? Or that's very trivial. But I think science fiction has a really great utility for a lot of purposes, and especially sort of the world that we live in now, right? Like the whole world's uncertain. Like every day there's some sort of like new crisis or some sort of new technology that we have to contend with, right? Yeah. And so the idea that like the world is always changing is it's pretty ripe for sort of applying sort of like a science fiction storytelling technique. Yeah. And so we get people to think about not just the world as it is, but what if the world was this way? And we get them to look at the world through different lenses. So looking through sort of a social lens, and how is the world different when you apply this social lens? Or how is the world different when you consider sort of economies that might grow up around this technology, around this change? And so we train people to sort of look for trends and sort of look for opportunities and see not just what's in front of them, but the second order impacts and the third order impacts. But we do that, I mean, it sounds very dry. It sounds like, Ambien, right? But we do that in a really fun way. And we do that through science fiction storytelling. And so, allowing people to be a character in this science fiction story, this sort of weird new world that we're all thrust into. Because if you think about science fiction, right? Science fiction is it's stories about people that are thrust into these weird situations, and the way that they survive, right? Whether it's Marty McFly or Luke Skywalker or Katniss Everdeen, right? The way that these people survive is through their pluck and their ingenuity and their resilience and their unique way of looking at the world. And so if we can train veterans who have been trained a lot of the times to think one certain way, and if it's not like that, then it's wrong. If we can train them to think a little bit differently, right? And think sort of like not just like checking boxes, but thinking outside of the box.
Yeah. So do you guys do this through storytelling? Do you do it through drawings? What methods, what mediums do you use to help project the future for our veterans?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So these are small group workshops that our veterans will come into, and we'll spend 9 weeks with them. And so the first 3 weeks is really sort of like, okay, what are we doing? Like, how is thinking about the future going to impact my very real life? And then after that, after we give them sort of a crash course in these techniques that that other big organizations use, Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits and governments around the world, even the military uses science fiction thinking and scenario planning to think about sort of their strategies. And so we train people in the same methods, and then we let them sort of go off and think about all the things that might impact their future and where they want to be. And so we do that through interviews and sort of some collaborative storytelling and some workshopping of ideas. And then by the time that we're done, so now we're 2/3 of the way through this program, by the time that we're finished with that, we will put these folks in touch with a concept artist, somebody who works on movies and television shows and comic books and video games. And this concept artist will take their story and work with them to create this artifact of their future. So they're actually seeing, what they've researched in a very like high definition way. And they get to see themselves as a person that's in that future. And what's really interesting about that is that, the research says that what we're doing is we're not only training people to think about futures, but we're sort of helping them develop new skills for motivation and behavior change. And then when you apply sort of a futures lens to that, right? We're sort of making memories of things that haven't happened yet, which I just think is wild, right?
That's really cool. So you're creating memories
Hmm.
of things that haven't happened yet, but so then it makes you believe that they're possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of part of the magic of it, is that it's you start to suddenly start talking about this story, and then now you understand the story, you believe the story, and it can be real.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a really interesting body of research around something called future self continuity. And future self continuity is the idea of knowing who you are in the future. And what's really interesting is that if you ask people, anybody, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of, what they do for a living, regardless of their background, whether they're veterans or, not, if you ask anybody, mostly across the board, if you ask them, have you changed a lot in the past 10 years? Like, I'll ask you, in, the Jack of 2023 and the Jack of 2013, are they similar people, or?
Guys, I'm not a typical case, so whatever his answer is going to end up being may surprise you. For me, the answer is I'm extremely different.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's what you're expecting to hear.
That's exactly right, right?
Okay,
People
okay.
people think that, yes, absolutely, I'm a much different person than I was 10 years past. And that's across the board,
Okay.
right? But then what the research says, which is fascinating, is if you ask those same people, will you be different 10 years from now? The answer is, nah, I'm pretty much fully baked. I am who I am.
So people can't visualize it. They don't understand the concept that, hey, life is a river.
Yeah.
And every time you step in it, it changes, and things are always changing as you're going.
That's beautifully said. And I think what's really interesting is that the research says that people thinking about themselves in the future, even if they think just 18 months away, right? They start to see that person not as an extension of themselves right now, but as a stranger. Like, that person is no different than a person that you see on the street that you just pass by. And so doing this exercise and doing these workshops, I think, and the research sort of bears this out, our early data shows that we're moving in the right direction, that we're closing the gap, that we're getting people to recognize their future selves not as a stranger, but as someone that they can become.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that is a really cool program to hear you talk about. I don't have a ton of other questions for you, but I do want to know, where can people find out more about this?
Yeah, so right now we're writing a lot of papers, and we're doing some research on the things that we did last year, and then we're working on hopefully expanding this throughout Arizona. So right now the best place to find this information is at csi.asu.edu/veterans. So csi.asu.edu/veterans.
And we'll put it up on the screen later.
Right there, right there.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming in, Bob. We're really excited to be putting on this Veteran Stories podcast. We feel like there's a lot of veterans out there that have stories to tell. They have really interesting and unique experiences. Some people, it's going to be their backstory about why they joined the military. Some people, it'll be, the experiences that they had while they were serving. Other people, it's the awesome work that they're doing to try to help our veterans, which we totally appreciate.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's our goal. So if you like hearing stories like this and you want to hear more, make sure to, click that subscribe button and check it out. But yeah, Veteran Stories Podcast coming to you each week. Thanks very much.